This is the case of Victor Hale, the quiet landlord of Willows Creek whose rented bedroom became a trap no one ever escaped. Behind the faded walls of his two-story house, travelers like Marcus, a free-spirited drifter, and Emily, a college student passing through, walked into what seemed like an ordinary room, only to vanish forever. What looked like a safe stop for the night turned into the finale of their lives. Before we dive into this chilling story, make sure to support this channel by subscribing and staying active. Your support helps us bring more true crime documentaries like this one to life, and trust me, you won't want to miss the dark twists ahead. Now, let's step into the house on the edge of town, where every guest's story ended the same way, with a locked door, a silent room, and no way out. Willows Creek was the kind of place people rarely noticed. A single stoplight, a diner that closed at 8, and streets so quiet at night you could hear the leaves shifting in the wind. Nothing ever happened there, or so it seemed. At the edge of town, where the asphalt narrowed into a road lined with trees, stood a two-story house that looked ordinary at first glance. Its paint was fading, the shutters tilted with age, and the lawn seemed just a little too wild, as if no one cared enough to keep it neat. Yet for reasons no one could quite explain, people in town often found themselves staring at it longer than they meant to. Neighbors began to notice strange details. Cars parked outside for days, but their owners were never seen leaving. Lights flickered in the upstairs window, even in the middle of the night. Packages were delivered and vanished from the porch without anyone spotting the man who lived there. Whispers started, the kind that grew sharper each time someone new passed through town and never returned. It was always the same story, a traveler looking for a cheap room, a backpacker moving across states, someone who needed a bed for the night. They stayed in that house, and then they were gone. At first, these stories spread like harmless gossip. People assumed the visitors simply moved on, no reason to question it. But as the list of names grew longer, unease set in. Flyers began to appear on bulletin boards, faces of missing people who had last been seen alive in Willows Creek. Slowly, the town's reputation shifted from quiet to unsettling. Parents warned their children to keep their distance. Drivers refused to pull over near the property. And the upstairs bedroom, the one no guest ever seemed to leave, became the heart of a mystery that would soon break the town open. The first time the town realized something was truly wrong was when Marcus failed to come home. He was a traveler, the kind of man who liked to take long drives across states with little more than a bag in his trunk. He checked into the house one Friday evening, telling his family he'd be back by Monday. His car remained parked in the driveway all weekend, but no one ever saw him step outside again. When he didn't return calls, his family panicked. By Tuesday, a missing persons report was filed, and search parties combed through the nearby woods, fields, and even the shallow rivers that bordered the town. Despite days of effort, there was no sign of him, no footprints, no personal belongings, nothing. It was as if he had been swallowed whole. At first, people clung to the hope that Marcus had simply chosen to leave his life behind. But that theory crumbled weeks later, when a young college student named Emily disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. She had been driving through on her way back to campus, choosing to rent a room for one night before finishing her trip. Her car, too, was left untouched outside the house. Her belongings were neatly packed inside, waiting for an owner who would never return. When her family arrived, desperate for answers, all they found was silence. Two disappearances could no longer be brushed aside as coincidence. The police tried to connect the dots, and soon a chilling pattern emerged. Both Marcus and Emily had rented the same upstairs bedroom. Both had entered the house late at night. And both had vanished without a single witness. Rumors spread quickly now, not as idle talk but as frightened warnings. The town began to wonder if that bedroom itself was cursed, or if someone inside the house knew far more than they were admitting. The man behind the house was Victor Hale, a figure who blended easily into the background of Willows Creek. He was quiet, polite when spoken to, and rarely drew attention. To most people, he was nothing more than a landlord offering cheap rooms to travelers who couldn't afford a hotel. He paid his bills on time, kept to himself, and never caused trouble in public. For years, no one thought twice about him. That sense of normality made the string of disappearances harder to believe. How could a man so ordinary be connected to something so sinister? Detectives began looking into his life, starting with records of the guests who had stayed in his home. The findings unsettled them. Many of the names matched missing person cases, scattered across different counties and states. Some were drifters without strong ties, others were students or workers just passing through. The last known trace of each was tied to Victor's property. When asked, Victor maintained that his guests left of their own free will. He claimed they paid for a night or two and then moved on. There were no arguments, no scenes, nothing unusual, at least from his perspective. Without bodies or evidence, the police had no solid ground to accuse him. Yet the neighbors' stories told a different truth. They swore they never saw guests leave during the day. They remembered cars sitting untouched for weeks, collecting dust, until one morning they would simply vanish, as though someone had driven them off in the dead of night. Some neighbors recalled strange sounds, heavy thuds, dragging noises, muffled banging, but whenever anyone got close, the house seemed silent, as if it had been holding its breath. The deeper investigators looked, the more the house began to feel like a stage, and Victor Hale like a man performing carefully to hide what lay behind the curtain. When investigators finally gained access to the upstairs bedroom, they immediately sensed something was wrong. The room was staged to look ordinary, with a freshly made bed, a lamp on the nightstand, and curtains drawn tightly against the window. But the details didn't add up. The air carried a faint metallic scent that didn't belong, a smell that clung to the walls even after repeated attempts to cover it. The floor creaked in uneven places, as though sections of the boards had been replaced or tampered with. On closer inspection, the window, the only possible escape besides the door, had been nailed shut from the inside, trapping anyone who entered. The carpet drew particular attention. At first glance, it appeared clean, but when peeled back, patches of discoloration spread across the padding beneath. Forensic testing revealed what investigators feared, traces of blood that had seeped deep into the wood. The stains weren't small, they stretched across the floor in irregular shapes, some darker and more concentrated, suggesting repeated violence over time. Attempts had been made to clean them, but the effort was incomplete. Beneath a layer of fresh paint on the walls, faint smears and scratches showed through, as though someone had tried to erase the evidence of desperate hands pressed against the surface. One corner of the room revealed a particularly disturbing discovery, a series of gouges etched into the baseboard, claw-like marks made by fingernails dragged across the wood. It painted a horrifying picture of what had taken place. Guests hadn't simply left quietly. They had fought, struggled, and left traces of their terror behind. The room was no longer just a rented space, it was a carefully disguised chamber where lives had ended. The cheerful exterior of the house now seemed like nothing more than a mask hiding a nightmare within. The breakthrough came when investigators lifted the bed frame and found that it was not fixed to the floor as it appeared. Instead, it concealed a trapdoor built seamlessly into the wood beneath. The craftsmanship was crude but effective, hidden under layers of carpet and furniture that made it easy to miss. When the door was pried open, it revealed a narrow passage leading downward into darkness. The air drifting from the opening was damp and foul, carrying with it a heaviness that instantly confirmed what everyone feared: this was no ordinary storage space. The tunnel connected directly to the basement, a place far more sinister than anyone expected. What they discovered there stripped away any lingering doubts about Victor Hale's double life. Against the concrete walls were iron restraints bolted into place, a setup that looked like it had been used repeatedly. In one corner, investigators found piles of personal belongings, wallets with IDs still inside, wristwatches, jewelry, and folded clothing that clearly didn't belong to Victor. Each item was carefully stored, almost as if they were trophies. The names matched those of the missing, linking the property directly to their disappearances. It became clear that the bedroom upstairs wasn't just a coincidence. It had been designed as a trap. The nailed window, the locked door, and the hidden passage created a perfect snare for unsuspecting guests. Once they entered, there was no way out. They were overpowered, forced below the house, and left in a place no one would ever willingly walk into. For months, maybe years, the truth had been beneath the floorboards, just a few feet from where neighbors carried on their daily lives. The evidence was overwhelming, and for the first time, the horrifying scale of Victor's secret began to emerge. When police finally moved in to arrest Victor Hale, they expected resistance, but they did not anticipate the level of preparation waiting inside the house. Victor had fortified the upstairs bedroom, reinforcing the walls and wiring parts of the floor with makeshift supports and booby traps. Officers surrounded the property, lights glaring through the windows as negotiators tried to coax him out. For hours, there was no response. The only movement came from the flicker of a light in the upstairs window, the same window where so many guests had last been seen alive. When the tactical team forced entry, the atmosphere inside felt like stepping into a stage set for a final act. Victor had stripped the room down, leaving it bare except for the bed frame and a single chair. He refused to be taken quietly. As officers advanced, the floor beneath them suddenly gave way. Victor had rigged the boards to collapse under weight, creating a deadly trap designed to bury anyone who tried to reach him. Chaos erupted as part of the room caved in, pulling officers into a hollow space beneath the floor. But this collapse revealed far more than Victor had intended to show. Beneath the ruined boards was a concealed chamber, larger than the basement tunnel already discovered. The stench of decay filled the air as the beam of a flashlight illuminated piles of human remains, carefully arranged as though hidden for years. Every missing guest, every unanswered question, was buried there. The grim truth was laid bare in the moment of Victor's desperate attempt to destroy himself and his secrets. The deadly finale he had prepared for the police became the very thing that uncovered the full extent of his crimes, leaving no doubt about what had taken place in that house. The collapse of the upstairs bedroom forced the entire town to confront a truth that no one wanted to believe. Victor Hale was not simply a landlord with odd habits, he had been a predator hiding in plain sight. The discovery of the hidden chamber beneath the house confirmed years of suspicion and ended the mystery that had cast a shadow over Willows Creek. Each family of the missing was finally given an answer, though it was far darker than they could have imagined. Personal belongings found in the basement were carefully catalogued and returned, tokens of lives that had ended in the most horrific way. Closure came, but it carried a weight that never lifted. The house itself became a symbol of fear. Crowds gathered daily to stare at the structure, pointing toward the upstairs window as if it still held the power to trap anyone who looked too long. Reporters flooded the small town, broadcasting the story to audiences far beyond its borders. The quiet community that once prided itself on safety was now infamous for a house of horrors. Within months, officials ordered the property demolished, reducing it to rubble so no one would ever step foot inside again. But the land beneath it remained marked, a place forever tied to tragedy. Victor Hale never offered an explanation. He left behind no letters, no testimony, no glimpse into the mind that had orchestrated such cruelty. His motives remained buried with him, fueling endless speculation. Some believed he collected victims as trophies, others thought he was driven by a compulsion no one could ever understand. Whatever the reason, the legacy of the house endured. Locals warned travelers to keep moving, to never linger on that stretch of road. The building was gone, but its story survived as a chilling reminder that behind ordinary walls, unimaginable horrors can hide.